Welcome everyone to Time to Awaken. I am your host, Michael, and below you will find my YouTube links, my Rumble channel link, and below that the Mark of the Beast video. That is something that can only be played on Rumble. YouTube will not allow me to play that, and as such, I have to leave it over on Rumble. They don't like the truth, obviously. So, that said, below that is my email account. And if you'd like to contact me for any reason, discuss something that you have a question about or whatever, by all means do so. In my different locations, whether it's on Rumble or on YouTube, if you would like to give me a thumbs up or something, that would be wonderful, because that allows more people to actually see it. I don't have enough people to, make any money off of any of these, so it's not really a big deal. But if you give a thumbs up, it actually apparently gives more connection, more weight to people seeing this. Okay? All right. That said, I am doing a video tonight that is out of the ordinary for me. Mostly I have always done biblical teaching, and in a way this is, but from a world perspective today. All right. So there's not much in the way of biblical teaching. I might refer to a couple things here and there and let you go and search it out and find it in the Bible. Okay. All right. So what we have here is a video that I called United Nations 2030 Agenda. Okay. Roadmap to the end. And it certainly is. It aligns perfectly. So many people have spoken of a time when certain things are happening. We're looking for signing of a document or something like that shows us not the time of the Antichrist, but just something that started it all off. And I'm going to show you a very, very, very strong possibility. Now, if you've been out there looking at other end times sites or end times information, a lot of people have run across this 2030 agenda that's out there. Okay? Maybe not. I keep finding a lot of people out there. Most people who are asleep probably have never heard of this. Okay? And so it's a very important connection to our end time understanding. All right? So here we go. Have you ever heard people praying for world peace? Have you ever prayed for world peace? All right? Peace in our time. So the reality is that praying for peace is like praying for the tribulation to start. That's right. If you pray for peace, you're praying for the tribulation to start. Now, some people would say, okay, yeah, hey, that brings us to the end. And others would go, what? No way. I thought when this all happened that Christ is going to bring peace. Well, he is. But we have to go through tribulation first. We got to go through the whole tribulation before that happens. And that's 14 years yet. Okay? That's 14 years. The end of tribulation is 14 years from now. All right. So, again, from the beginning, people have prayed for peace, but then there's a consequence, and in this case, it's a consequence from Abraham, Israel, right? So we have Abraham consequences. What happened? Well, he was promised something. He was promised a son, which would start off his whole future world, like number of people is like the sand on the sea or the stars in the sky, etc., right? And in midstream, he lost his way. His wife is like, well, I'm not going to have any children at my age, so guess what? Why don't you give me, or why don't you take my servant, right, and have a child through her? And so he did that, right? But she was a servant, right? She wasn't free. And the Bible talks about that back in Galatians. It's worth reading. Okay? I think it's like around Galatians 3, I think. Anyway, and so she had Ishmael, which was technically his first son, right? But in a way, he was illegitimate because he was from a servant. He wasn't what God intended, right? Started out with lack of belief, and he went against God, and through that, he had Ishmael. Okay? But God promised him that child, and eventually they came back and eventually told him, hey, in 1 year, right? It's interesting that it was at 14 years, which is what I believe the tribulation period is going to be, but at a 14-year period, he had his second son, okay? So Ishmael was 14 as Isaac was being born. All right. So he had Isaac, and then he had other children through other wives after Sarah died, okay? And so through all of them, we see the world as we see it today, okay? We see the Islamic countries through Ishmael, and through the other countries, we also see what's called Arab countries. And even though they both have Islamic beliefs, they are two different groups. Okay? And because of all of that, we see war today throughout history. And that war, those skirmishes will never end until Christ comes back at the end. Okay? It's just what it is. So again, the Bible tells us there will be no peace until the end of the tribulation period, till Christ comes back at the end. Okay? He will be here multiple times before the end, but at the very end, he returns and he'll have 1,000-year reign. Now, technically, if there's the pre-trib, he doesn't come down to the earth. He brings us up. Okay? And so he doesn't step foot on the earth until the first 7 years of tribulation are complete. Okay? All right. So, how are we going to be able to see this in the real world? Well, we're gonna see this. We're gonna play this out. And as I said already, we've got this whole Bible thing going on where normally I don't do anything without biblical verses, but this time we're going to touch what the world sees. Okay? So there are 3 things that many people understand that we should be seeing in the end of days. Okay? As we go in tribulation. We're expecting to see a one world currency. We're expecting to see a one world government. And we're expecting to see one world religion. Okay? All right. So, let's go take a look and see what is truly happening in the world as we know it today. Okay? Most people don't even know these things are here. But here we are. And we're going to show everything. Well, actually, there's a lot more out there that we're not even going to show. There is so much leading to this end of times. And most people don't even know we're here. That it exists. Okay? All right, let's move on. So here it is, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Here's what it's called, okay? Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Now, all of this really sounds good. You can go to their website, Okay? You can go to their website and you can read about it. Okay? I have a little bit of information here in a few minutes. But if you go and you actually go to this website and you go to the UN and look for this, just do a search for that. Okay? It'll bring it right up and you can read all of their stuff. And you go there and you scratch your head and you're like, wait, what? This all sounds great, right? But what are they going to do to get there? And are they throwing God and his truth and the Bible away? God might have something to say about all of this. All right, let's move on. So there's more to it. And remember I said that I'm not going to go into Bible, but this is part of the teaching. This is what I've been teaching throughout all the time I've done my videos. I have taught this right here. And what was interesting was I never really paid attention to the numbers. I knew about the 2030 agenda. I knew all of this was kind of playing out in this time period, but I never paid attention to the numbers. And, you know, stupid me, I just ignored it and you know, just knowing what was coming. And then I was watching a video the other day, believe it or not, on Epic Times, right? And Epic Times is a open news, right? It's not mainstream. It's kind of an open news agency, free news. And they did this video about all the stuff that's going on about the people that are coming to the United States from South America, Asia, all around the world, Africa, right? And they're all coming into the United States technically illegally, right? And there was a huge discussion about how they're getting here and what this is all about, okay? And we are going to discuss that before we're done here and what that's about. But what ended up happening was I looked at the date and I looked at the year and all of a sudden it hit me because I knew 2016 and I know 2030. And those two dates or those two things together just hit me like a brick. It was like, oh my goodness, there is what we're looking for. It's all right here. And it made total sense. And when I put all the pieces together and you go out there and you search out the internet for all of this stuff, all of a sudden you realize we're just staring at it, okay, without even thinking about it. All right. So here it is. They signed the document actually in 2015, September of 2015. It's interesting that we keep coming around to this September 2015 time period for signing of all these evil documents, okay? But this was signed in 2015. It went into place in 2016, okay? And this is the same year that I've been saying the 7 easy years began. Remember, we talk about the 20 years of Jacob. 20 years of Jacob. It's Jacob's trouble. Genesis 31:41. Okay? So we have 7 easy years, 7 harder years, equaling 14 years to the 2 brides. And then at 6 years at the end for the cattle, okay, which are the Jews. We find that in Scripture. I think it's in Ezekiel or something like that, where he calls them cattle. Okay, and so they're the cattle in this understanding. And it's 20 years. The 21st year, the last year of tribulation, if you want, it's not really tribulation, but it kind of is. The last year is the year of the covenant, the year that all of the people, all of Israel and Judah are finally brought back together for the first time, right? The 10 tribes plus the 2 tribes are finally brought back together for the first time since they were taken from the land way back in biblical times. First time, okay? They've never been together since. And this will be the first. And they'll be given their land that was promised back in time of Abraham. Okay? And then Jesus will be there to rule over them all for 1,000 years. All right. That said, here we have it. Signed in 2016. So this is our 7 easy years, which goes until 2023. Okay? So that last year, okay, was the end of the easy 7 years. So right now we're on, I don't even know, we're on May 12th or 13th. Okay? I think it's May 13th of 2024. Okay? We are in the year of the first seal judgment. First 7 years. We are waiting for that to happen. The first seal, the white horse rider, is Christ coming to get the 10% first fruits bride. That's what it is. I've got a video all about that called The White Horse Rider. Don't miss that. Okay? It'll prove out all of this. All right, so that ends the 7 easy years, 2023. This is what the Bible sometimes refers to as the 8th day or the 8th year. And so it's technically the first year of the next year. Okay? All right, that said, we add another 7 years. From 2023, the end of the easy 7 years, we add another 7 years, which brings us to the 2030 agenda year. Okay? So this 7 years, this is the Gentile period. This is the Gentile church period, right? The time when they will go, the multitude that will be left behind after the first fruits are taken. Okay? This is God's law. It has to happen this way. First fruits, multitude, gleaning. You can go look this up in Leviticus 23 and read it. Okay? It has to happen that way. It's God's law. And so this is the end of the multitude. This is the great harvest period. Okay? And they're going through tribulation. And this is the tribulation period when the Antichrist shows up. Okay? And the mark is given. All right? So this is the end of that, this 2030 period, the end of the Gentile period, as we see in Luke 21. The end of the Gentile period. Okay? And then we finally add the 7 years for the trumpets, which brings us to around 2036, 2037. 2037 is when the new covenant is put into place. Christ begins his 1,000-year reign, and this is the end of the trumpet period. All right? So the 6th trumpet would happen in 2036. Okay? That's going to have an interesting meaning on one of the very last slides. Okay? What's coming? Same thing for the other 2030 thing. 2030 would be a time period for another rest period in tribulation. Okay? 6 plus 1, 6 plus 1, 6 plus 1 seals, 6 plus 1 trumpets. It has to be 6 plus 1 seals, 6 plus 1 trumpets, equaling 14 years. Gotta happen. God's laws. Gotta play them out. All right? So this is what's playing out. And it's playing out right alongside this 2030 agenda for sustainable development. Okay? It's the timeline. All right. Now below that, I put a little bit of something extra there. It says 2 10-year periods leading to the Antichrist. Okay? So we watched the pre-trib period with all of its things that are happening. We finished it, right, last year. And you saw the pre-trib mark being given, and 70% took the mark. Okay? And that given, we know when it should show up, because we know it started in 2016. It was given in, approximately that time period, 3.5 to 4 years later, etc., etc. Okay. So we know how this is going to play out. We saw wars started. We saw all this stuff happening, but it gets worse in the second time period. Okay, far, far worse. And we saw food prices hiking and food disappearing off the shelves and sicknesses happening and all this stuff happening in the first time period. Think about what's coming in the second time period. We're already seeing it, and we're in the first year, and it's just going to continue to increase. Okay? Now, if you count from 2016 and you go 10 years, that brings you to around 2026, 2027, okay? Which is the exact time period that we just watched happen. But now we're in the second, that brings us to the middle of the second 7 years, the seals, the middle of seals, which is truly when the Antichrist shows up. So we have a 10 and a half year period in there. And that 10 and a half year period is where the Antichrist shows up. Okay? And then if you start from 2024, which is the beginning of the tribulation, and you do another 10 years from that point where the tribulation began, you go another 10 years, you see again a point where you see Antichrist, and then soon after these Satan showing up again. Okay? And so you have, again, these 2 10-year periods kind of being shown to us through this time period. Okay? It's just kind of an interesting side note that I came across as I was breaking this down. All right? So, let's get back to the 2030 agenda. Okay? So the 2030 agenda is all about equity versus equality. And like I said, as you read this, it all sounds so fair, doesn't it? See, so equalizing until you understand the agenda behind it. So I'll break it down. This is from off the internet. I looked up these two words and I broke it down accordingly. Okay? Equity and equality are often used interchangeably, but they have distinct meanings. Equality refers to the state of being equal in rights, status, or opportunities, where everyone is treated the same way, regardless of their individual circumstances. It is about providing the same resources and opportunities to all individuals or groups, regardless of where they live, what their circumstances are, etc. Okay? Doesn't mean they get the same equity. Okay? So some people live in poor countries. They might get freedom. They might get some food. They might get, whatever. Okay? The ability to move around, etc., etc. They might get equality in that form. On the other hand, equity is about fairness and justice, where resources and opportunities are allocated based on need. It recognizes that individuals or groups may have different starting points or circumstances, and therefore may require different levels of support to achieve an equal outcome. Equity is about leveling the playing field by identifying and addressing disparities to ensure everyone has what they need to succeed. But just because you're giving them that, does that mean they're going to appreciate that? Not that we can see in today's society. So to illustrate the difference, consider the following examples. Equality, providing the same education resources to all students regardless of their background or ability. Okay? Is that always fair? They get the education, they get the resources, but then what do they do with it when it's all said and done? Equity, providing additional support and resources to students who need it most, such as those from low-income families or with disabilities, to help them achieve academic success. Now, this is where things get kind of dicey, because you're giving things to one group over another group. Now, that might be jobs as well. Now, if someone actually goes through all of this and they get better grades, they're better at the job, but you give it to the other just because they're poor or a different race or a different color or a different this or a different that, and you give it to them out of that reasoning, even though the other one deserves what they got for how hard they worked, is that technically fair? I would contend not. I've seen a lot of unfairness in this whole setup. Okay? So in summary, equity is about treating everyone the same, while equity is about treating everyone fairly and justly, taking into account their unique needs and circumstances. Now, does everyone work equally? Does everyone do the same job? No. There's a lot of differences that you have to take into account when you deal with all of this stuff. And in this world that we live in, that's often not done. Okay, so equity versus equality. Right now, we have people that are coming across the U.S. border. Okay? Millions of them have come across in just the last 2, 3, 4 years. Multi-millions. Okay? They're being brought to the United States, but they're not walking there. They're not walking there. And this is where people don't always understand how so many people got there. Okay? So let's bring some understanding here as to how they're getting here. Now, there's different routes. Okay? Many Asians, if they have the money, they fly over to Mexico, land, and then pay their way in, and they're in, right? Because that's one route to get in. Africans can do the same. South Americans can do the same, right? There's different routes depending upon the amount of money that you have. Not exactly fair, is it? But that's what they call it. Okay? So that's one route. And there's different routes in between. Okay? So they start from South America, many of them. Okay? And they have to go through a no man's land. Okay? Where there are people there that will kill people or put them into a, shall we say, human trafficking or something thereof. Okay? This is just one of those places along the route. Okay? Now, they usually go in large groups. And on the one end, before they cross over this no man's land between South America and Central America, there is a UN post there where they are given a certain amount of information. They have possibilities. Again, some can be taken by boats, which is actually safer and faster, and some have to walk through these jungles with these people there. Okay? And it's very dangerous. And it's a separation between Central America and South America. Now, once they cross that border and they get through that no man's land, okay, when they get to Central America, then there's another UN encampment there with buildings and tents and all that kind of stuff sitting there, waiting for them to give them housing for a time. Okay? Food, housing, clothes, and money. Okay? From here forth, they're in the hands of the UN and paid for by a large amount by the United States itself. Okay? Now, they're given books, they're given IDs, they're given clothing, they're given money, they're given promises. Okay? And many have been told that they will be given free food, free housing, free medical care, etc. when they come to the United States. Not that they have to work for it, just that they are going to get this free stuff by just crossing over the border in the United States. And by crossing in, they have to tell others, the Border Patrol, that they're there. And they're given apps and phone numbers where they can make an appointment with the Border Patrol, so they know that they're going to be there at and then the Border Patrol can come and pick them up, and then they're processed and let go into the United States. But there's more. Okay? They are bussed from country to country. Literally, through 5 countries, including Mexico, they are bussed all the way from the bottom of Central America all the way up to the Mexican border. Bussed there. All of them. Most of them. Okay? However, again, another one of those countries, there is that human trafficking issue going on. So it can be very dangerous. But so it is. And they go through 5 countries being bussed from one country to the next. Okay? At the end, they're let go far enough away that the Border Patrol doesn't see them, but they can't get much closer because they know that the drug lords, the cartels, own that property between the United States and Mexico. And to get through, they have to get through the cartels. Now, if they get caught, they have to pay upwards of thousands of dollars, sometimes $5,000, $10,000. If they do not have the money to pay that $5,000 or $10,000, possibly per head, okay, then they have to agree to work for the cartels. And what that involves is they're then allowed to cross the border where they're being tracked by the cartels, and they have to do drug trafficking in the United States, and often the women and children are being human trafficked, right? And often go into prostitution, etc. Okay? Until these cartels are paid their money. This is the route, and this is how they get there. And they're being helped by the United States and United Nations. So why is the United Nations doing this? Okay? We're going to get into that a little bit more in future slides, but I wanted you to understand how this is coming about. But let's just say when you read through the web page and you read what they're trying to do, remember, this is equity. This is equality / equity. So the United States is the richest country in the world, right? More or less, per capita. We have, most people, our poorest people are probably more rich than most people across the country, or across the world rather. But it also costs more for food and supplies and the things we live with. We have more stuff though, right? All right. So in order to create equity, what was started back in 2016 and forward was this concept that we are to bring anyone who desires to leave one place and go to another to do so, and to give them equal capabilities that were given, that we have here. So what does that mean? So all these people that are coming in, they're getting all this free stuff because they have nothing, and so they have to equalize it. So they're getting, probably a few $1,000s a month. They're getting free food often. They're getting free housing, etc. And they're getting this for free, and they're going to remain here until they can get their citizenship, and some of them up to, get this, 14 years from now, as the backlog is right now. Okay? So as this happens, we're seeing less and less food on our shelves, along with the droughts, the flooding, the other stuff that's going on in our world. Less food, less medicine. This is going to all those people that are coming across our borders. Okay? So we're giving it to them because, well, they have less and we have more, and they deserve it more because they have less. Equity. Okay? This is how the United Nations thinks. This is how our world governments think today. Okay? And so we are going to be brought down. And when I mean brought down, I mean really brought down, because the United States has to go away for this 2030 agenda to happen. This whole world agenda cannot happen unless the United States is brought down. Okay? And so we're seeing all these people being, especially men, mostly men, being brought into our country. And you can imagine what those men are probably coming across to possibly do in the future. We're already seeing some of the stuff that's going on in our colleges and so on. And if they don't like what they see, which they're already having problems with in New York, right? They're getting mad at New York already and other places because they're not getting the food and the housing that they think they deserve, even though it's absolutely free. All right. That's where this is going. So it's all about equity. So, the United States, our monetary system is slowly eroding, as we have the BRICS system out there. If you haven't heard of that, that is a new economy brought about by 5 other countries, and now several others have joined into that to stop having to use the US dollar to pay for anything. Okay, so that'll bring down our dollar eventually. And part of all of this is also to bring in digital dollars, right? Rather than printing off dollars, they want to be able to track everything we're doing. And so they will give us a certain amount of money. It'll become digital dollars rather than physical dollar bills. Banks are already having trouble getting money. And if you've never noticed, 2017, maybe 2021 are the last bills ever printed here in the United States. Now, we're still seeing coins, but as far as dollars and bills and stuff, I haven't seen, from my understanding, 2017 or 2021 are the last bills to ever have been printed. But the concept here is that dollars will soon be departing. The banks are already using this on the screen, this FedNow. Most banks in the United States are now on and into this FedNow. And the younger generation, they like this idea. They don't understand what's coming and what this involves. And so they're all for this. I even asked a young lady in the bank. I talked to her about this FedNow, and she was all into it. And I was like, if you only knew where this is going to lead. But this is our digital currency. This is what has to happen for future mark to take place, right? Can't buy or sell without the mark. And so this is where it's going. Now, hopefully this won't get taken down from where, and I can put it on Rumble. Okay, and I will say so otherwise if that happens. All right. That said, this is where the United States is headed now. Okay, and it will come into being probably sooner than later. Okay, it won't be very long. And this is where it's going. Australia already has a bank that's doing this. Not to the Fed now, but their own digital currency there. Okay, their people will no longer be able to get cash or bring in cash. It'll only be digital. Okay, you look on your wallets, on your phones, your digital wallets. On every phone is that, along with a way to check to see if you have taken a specific thing that was given during COVID, okay, during that time period. And they will be able to track you and know whether you have done your part or not, okay? It's part of all the digital wallets out there, both Apple and Android, okay? It's all included in every electronic device that you're going to have. All right, then shows up the United Nations. About the same time the United States started switching over to FedNow, United Nations in the last several years have been switching over to a what they call a blockchain or digital currency of their own. Okay, kind of a Bitcoin type thing. And so they've got this digital transformation going on with that. And again, this is part of that equity thing, because once this is complete, what will happen is that all of the currencies will fall under this to equalize and equitize everyone in the world, one world currency, right? Because all the currencies will probably fall during the first 2 to 3 years of this time period, when World War III begins, famine increases, and the financial systems fall, which is why everyone will accept this Antichrist, this guy that everybody trusts somehow. And yeah, you get the picture. That's how and why it has to happen in the 3rd or 4th year of the tribulation, is because all of this has to happen to bring about the world to accept all of this to happen. Okay? So this continues, this whole concept. We have the concept of decentralization. In other words, right now we have Central Bank of the United States and Central Bank of Australia and Central Bank of United Kingdom, etc. Okay, we have several banks, big banks, right? But they're all connected, whether people like to think about that or not. But now we're going to decentralize. Okay, they're going to decentralize, and they're going to create this currency. All right, and make it so everyone has the same currency with the same amount of buying power. Like I said, all of it sounds great when you start looking at the way they show it. But when it's all said and done, and you look at the fairness of it all, it isn't always as fair as people think it is. And it isn't until they lose everything that they come to realize what it was that they thought was so great about it. Okay, so $6 billion United Nations agency launches Bitcoin Ethereum crypto fund. Okay, so if you've ever given money to UNICEF, this is what they're talking about. So UNICEF switched over to this digital dollar thing, okay, as an experiment. And that's where they're at today. All right. So a $6 billion United Nations agency launches the Bitcoin Ethereum crypto fund. This took place all the way back in 2019. Remember, this has already been going on for 7 years now. We're in the 8th. It started in 2016. This is a 2019 article. This back here was again in 2018. Okay. So we're seeing everything. And so we're in 2024. This is, 6 years later, 5 years later. And here we are. And do you not think that it's gotten stronger, that they've improved and increased all of this? They have. I've seen more information over the last year or so about how this is happening. Okay? So the UN wants to adopt Bitcoin and Ethereum, and soon. Now this was done in 2021. Okay? On September 11th. Interesting number, is it not? It keeps coming up. And it says, come celebrate 10 years of decentralizing the future. Okay? 2024. Decentralizing the future. There it is. So they were getting ready to kick this off. It's already kicked off. It already exists. Okay? I believe it started last year in 2023. And like I said, this has to happen in order for the digital, for all of the future things to come into place. Remember, I said there are 3 things, right? 3 things that we have to see. We have to see a central money, right? That everybody uses the same currency. We have to have the same one world, the same government across the world, right? And that's what this is about. This is what they're trying to bring about. And then a one single religion where everybody just accepts one religion. No matter what you believe, you're just under this one world religion. We're getting there. Okay? All right. Now, I talk about dates. Remember that 9/11? Well, the opposite of 9/11 in the year is 3/11. Okay? I talked about this in a previous video. 3/11. So on March 11th, 2020, the pandemic began. Okay? And this wasn't the first time that this happened on this date. All right? If you look on here, shortly before breakfast on Monday, March 11th, okay, 1918. Yes, that's right, 1918. This started, okay? So March 11th, 1918, this started in the United States. The first one in the U.S. And what we're seeing here is the end of World War I time frame, okay? But this started in 1918. It lasts from 1918 to 1920. Does that year sound familiar? It should. It's a 100-year period. So in this case, it started in 1918 and it ended in 1920. A 3-year period. Okay? And in both cases, we had a March 11 date. Either way, a March date. Okay? So, again, this is pictures of all this happening with kind of headlines going on, etc., and what was going on. It was called the Great Influenza. Some call it the Spanish flu. It was exceptionally deadly, although it wasn't at the beginning. It got more so. Okay. And you remember how they kept telling us, oh, it's going to get worse, going to get worse, and then eventually got better. I don't think that was planned. So this was the H1N1 influenza A virus. Okay. Now, since then, they've had a chance to play with our viruses and make them worse, and inside the chemical laboratories, etc. And so this was just the first one in 1918, and then we've had many, many since. Okay. What's interesting here is 9/11 shows, or 11/11 shows up. Now, many people around the world are seeing this 11/11 date, which is extremely interesting to me, because here it says the Great War ended, and I believe that right around that date sometime is when everything kicks off for the tribulation, etc. Okay? So the Great War ended here. Does the Great War start in 11/11? Interesting perspective. We shall see. All right. So we're going to talk about the New World Religion, the One World Religion. If you want to get a perspective of what we're looking at here, go read the Luke version of the Transfiguration story. Okay, it talks about it talks about, Jesus changing and what I expect to see, when we leave, right? But there's more to it. After all of that happens, and the two other men that were with Jesus disappeared, Peter says, let's build 3 tabernacles, one for Jesus, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. Elijah being for the first fruits, and Jesus being for the Jews at the end. Okay, why? Because Jesus is coming back at the end. All right, that said, you could call these the evil perspective of these. And it says there that Peter not knowing what he was saying. Well, I think that's a reference to our future day, a prophetic statement, because here we have the Pope, who the church, the Catholic Church, considers as Peter. Okay, building these 3 tabernacles. Okay, the Abrahamic houses. So one is for the supposed Christian church or Catholic community, because you're not allowed to speak about Jesus in this church. Okay. One is for Islam, the Sunni Muslims. Okay. Named after, so the first one's named after the Pope, the current Pope. The second one is named after the imam that signed the agreement with the Pope back in 2016 also, I think, or 17 or something like that. And then the last one is a Jewish one. Okay, Jewish synagogue. Interesting. And that one is named, so here are the names down here. Give me a second. See if I can make this happen. So we have, it's in Sadayat Island in Abu Dhabi, okay, in the UAE, okay. It's already built. It's here. It talks about getting built, but it's already built. It's open. It opened, I think, in March of last year. Okay. I thought this was all going to kick off right about that time period, and it didn't. So, but then we realized it's got to have an 8th year to this. Okay. So the first one is called St. Francis Church, after the current Pope. Imam El Tayyib Mosque, after the head Sunni Muslim imam. And then Moses ben Maimon. Okay. And that man, that actual name is Maimonides. And This is a man that the um, modern Jews, they like worship this guy. All right, he's the one who wrote all of the false calendars, the laws, rewrote all the laws and everything like that. And these are the false laws and the false calendars that they follow. Okay, but they've worshipped this guy, and so they named this evil tabernacle after him. Okay, so this is just coming out of Wikipedia, but this is what they actually put out back in 2018 and 19, etc., to show this time period. Okay? All right. So this is called the World Fraternity. Okay? And they came together in 2022, in September, I think it's September 15th of 2022. And all the world religions, now before that, the imam and the Pope signed a historic agreement together as one religion, okay? And then in September of 2022, I think it was September 15th, they came together, and all of the major religions all around the world came and signed the agreement as well. This is the one world religion. They came together and signed this agreement together. Okay, the concept is supposedly it'll bring peace to the world, etc. And I'll show you some of the beliefs here in a moment. Okay, but that's what this is about. They signed that. Now, at the end of the year, around I think it was October, there was a COP conference. Okay, they have these COP conferences every year. Okay, and they talk about end of the world stuff. It's not what they call it, but they talk about all the things they're going to do to us. Okay, and in that time period, in October, I think it was actually right around Halloween, November 1st, sometime around there. They had their first. They went up on a mountain. They had their first worship service together, where they worshipped the sun, because they went to Egypt and they worshipped the sun. Okay, and then they took a fake 10 commandments on stone, written in stone, and they threw it on the ground and broke it into fragments, broke it into pieces, and they said basically God has failed the earth, right? Because this is all about man-made global warming, and we all know where that goes, right? It's the religion. It's the new religion. And so this is where it went. And then they rewrote the 10 Commandments around this new world religion. It's a thing. It's true. You can go search it out yourself. Somewhere I actually have pictures of this thing. Okay. And then, like I said, in 2023, a little while after that, I think it was in March or something like that, these tabernacles were opened up. Okay? So there's your one world religion. They're not in full capability yet, but keep in mind that we still have a 14-year period to go. Okay? We still have a 14-year period to go. And we're just starting the tribulation period. But the Antichrist isn't here yet. All right, and there's this historic get together of what they do this every year too. They get together with these world religions and talk things through and whatever. Okay, and here's a picture with all these people. Okay, so there's that declaration. Okay, Congress of Leaders of World and Traditional Religions International. And if you look at the blue stuff there, Congress of Leaders of World and Traditional Religions International on 15 September 2022. Okay, this is when they signed their one world religion, all the major religions signing on together at this Congress. Interesting, Congress number 7. Okay? And so this is their declaration. And they name these things, etc. Okay. So here's their declaration. Here's part of the Global Religion Declaration. Okay? And again, when you just think about this or you read it, you think, oh, doesn't sound so bad. And this is just a small number of the whole. Okay, there are pages of this, and at the top there you see, and I think it's an Australian website that talks about this. Okay, I think this guy is like an end time guy as well. Like in one of these, down here at the bottom right, it talks about earthquakes are up 254% from 10 years ago, and that's true. Okay, as are the numbers of volcanoes going off, both above the water and below the water. Okay, and Luke 21 states that outright, that we will see, all this stuff going on. All right. So we note the pluralism in terms of differences in skin color, gender, race, language, and culture are oppressions of the wisdom of God in creation. It's interesting that they use that. Religious diversity is permitted by God, and therefore any coercion to a particular religion and religious doctrine is unacceptable. Okay, if you read into that, the first part sounds okay, no big problem. But then you read that and it talks about diversity. Well, the problem is, if you're a Christian, a true Christian, and you believe in what your Bible says, there's only one way to heaven, and that is through believing in Jesus Christ as your personal Savior. That's it. That is the only way. But here, everybody can go to heaven. This is what you see in TV and videos and every place else, where everybody gets to go to heaven. Okay, I have a family full that believe all of that. And it's just not true. The Bible never says that. Okay? But there it is. This is what they believe in. We stand in solidarity with the efforts of the United Nations, and notice there's the United Nations involved here again, and all other international, governmental, and regional institutions and organizations promoting dialogue among civilizations and religions, states, and nations. Okay? So they're all going to stand together through all of this religious stuff. Okay? All right. And they're going to, of course, accept all of the science and technology, medicine, industry, and other areas yet to be noted, blah, blah, blah. Okay? Even with all the stuff that's going on out there. Right? The WHO right now is trying to get a treaty signed by all the nations that they would be able to take over those nations in case of a new pandemic. Okay? All right. We note the inevitability of global digital development. We've read this, right? Digital development, as well as the importance of the role of religious and spiritual leaders of interacting with politicians in solving the problems of digital inequality. And there it is, what we just got done seeing earlier. So it brings about the digital currency. This is where they're going, right? And there's more. If you continue to read through these, solidarity, bringing it all together, digital stuff, it's all about this one world religion. Everybody comes about under the same banner. Okay? All right. At the end of this, the editor actually pulls out a section, okay? And does his own understanding. So it says, one world religion has officially started. This foundational human fraternity, that's what they call themselves, or Chrislam, right? For Christian Islam. But now they're a one world fraternity. So the foundational human fraternity document endorses one world government, a digital economy, and religious diversity, which will inevitably lead to the great falling away, which, by the way, has already happened. Religious leaders are also being encouraged to work with government to bring about the rollout of a digital currency, the beast system, 3 markers nailed in one document. So I'm already writing this out, and then I come across this, and I'm like, this is perfect. I mean, it's true. The sentiments contained in the human fraternity document also plays into blasphemy laws and supports UN offense legislation. Right. So according to the UN, if you speak the name of Jesus, you're speaking blasphemy. You're speaking hate speech. Okay. Under UN law. It, in effect, stops criticism of another's religion, even if what you say is true. The cost of free thought and free speech, a basic requirement for any free person. Being nice is replacing truth in both science and now religion. How long before a version of this human fraternity for world peace and living document will be used to close down pulpits and censor scriptures in the name of keeping the peace? This is all already happening in places like Australia and especially Canada. This is just the beginning. Human fraternity will eventually be used to cancel out all religions. Mark these words. And it is. We are here. As of 2016, when that document was signed, it began the first 7 easy years, just as I showed towards the beginning there, and we're playing it out now. We are in the year of the first seal. Tribulation will begin, I believe, at the end of this year. Okay? When it says soon, and I've pointed out soon in several places in Scripture, when it talks about soon, I believe that soon is approximately 6 months. It could be 4 months, 6 months, but whatever. And I'm going to show you something here in a little while that points to that in the world. Okay? So here we have it. The U.S. has stopped supplying weapons to Israel. Now, I've been saying now for a while that we've been waiting and watching for an Israeli event, right? Where Israel must be taken from the land just for the Gentile period, right? Until the end of the Gentile period. That's what Christ said about the end times. Okay? But all of this stuff has to happen first before this happens. So, what we have here is the Gentile period doesn't end until the first half of tribulation. The first seals is complete, right? 7 seals. That has to happen. But it says that Israel, the country, must be taken from their land for 7 years. And I explain that in many of my videos. Okay? They haven't been following God's laws, etc. And they must be taken from the land because the land must rest according to God's law. Okay? And so they must be taken. So they'll be unable to protect themselves. Right now, they are completely dependent on the U.S. for those weapons. And over many years, people often wondered where the U.S. would be in this scenario. Well, we now know what will happen. Okay? We're holding the weapons. Now, they say they have enough to finish the job they're doing now, but when they're all said and done, they are surrounded. And we already saw some of the events happened already according to what Luke 21 states will happen to them. We saw them happen back in October 7th. Okay? We saw it happen, but not to the extent that it will happen. Okay? And so we saw the beginning of it. They are surrounded, and as Jesus says, they will be taken from the land, and it will be brutal. Worse than what we already saw back in October 7th of 2023. Okay? All of what's happening right now is leading into this time period. All right. On April 8th, we saw the longest solar eclipse, which made an X across the U.S. Now, there was one in 2017. Okay? September 2017. We saw another one last year in 2023 in October, which crossed the United States. And then we saw another one on April 8th. Now, I believe because the solar eclipses don't have anything to do with the calendar, the lunar eclipses do. Okay, there's one at the beginning, one at the end of their year. Okay, that being said, these lunar eclipses, I believe, are warnings for a time period. Okay, and remember I just talked about that whole soon being 6 months? Well, the Bible speaks to soon, and they will soon depart, or they will soon, okay? I believe that's about 6 months, okay? And then just a couple days ago, on May 11th, we saw an epic historical aurora. It was historical because it reached across the United States all the way down into Florida. As far as we know, that's never happened. Okay? If you take that date, 5/11, you run across and add 6 months, right? The opposite end of that is 11/11. Now, many people have been watching for an 11/11 date. And there it is, 6 months away from that aurora. The Bible tells us to be looking up. There's going to be events in the sun, the moon, and the stars. Look up, okay? And that's what we're doing. I believe a major event is going to happen, and it'll happen around that time period. Okay? The sun still has through 2025 for the solar maximum. Okay? So we're still building to the solar maximum into next year. And if this is any indication as to how strong these can get, this was 5 shots of CMEs, okay? A storm of 5 of them shot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And before that, another one that was X 4.5. And after that, another X. All right? And we saw multiple of these aurora borealises that were able to be seen. Now, we didn't get to see the next one because of storms and stuff, but I understand they were there. All right? So these are events that are playing out, leading up, looking up at the sun, moon, and stars. And there will be other events, I'm sure of it. Okay. Now, there's one more. If you remember, back at the beginning, I gave you dates again. Remember that? And I told you that at these 10-year events, well, we have 2 tribulation periods, okay? And at the end of these 2 tribulation periods, they end right around 2029, 2030, okay? The tribulation ends around 2029, and then you have 1 year rest. And then the trumpets ends around 2036, and then we have a 1 year rest. Okay? Watch this. Tracking Apophis, a reassuring trajectory. Well, I'm not so sure about that. Okay? This is called Asteroid Apophis, God of Chaos and Earth. Okay? Now, this is what they tell us now, but it can be changed. And they actually said that it can change its trajectory. Right? It could get caught up in the sun and completely change its direction. All right, that said, they tell us that it'll be close to the Earth on April 13th, 2029, which is that last 6th seal year that I keep talking about, going into the 30th year. Okay, 2030. Going into that 2030 year. There it is, 2029. That last year, the 6th seal of tribulation. Remember, the 7th year goes into which is 2030, goes into a rest period. Okay, same thing of 2036, 2037. So 2036 is the 6th trumpet Okay? And so here it is. I found this incredibly interesting. Friday the 13th, 2029, okay, on April 13th, and again in 2036. Both of them at the end of each of the tribulation periods. Perfectly aligned. Okay? If you want to check that out and see what that might look like, go check out both seals and trumpets judgments. Okay? And see what shows up around that time period. All right. So all of this leads to an understanding. We know that there's a person coming, right? We know that there's a person coming who will become the Antichrist, the person who will rule the earth, okay, during a 3.5 year period of seals, and again a return somehow during the trumpets period, and Satan will come back as well. They're two different people, all right, two different time periods here, and so they'll show up during that time period, okay, and there's our one world rule. But you read it back there. That is their agenda. They want to bring everyone under the same laws, the same everything, right? And that means a one world rule. And they want to do it by 2030. We're in 2024. Think about that. It's right there in front of our faces. I've been showing people these dates, these time periods, this year now for a while. And it's right in front of us. We are here. So soon, the first fruits bride will disappear. And according to Isaiah 66, those who escape, according to Luke 21, those who escape, don't go through tribulation, are going to return, go out into the nations, okay? And we see it again in Mark 13, okay? They're coming back. They're going to come out to the nations, and they're going to bring in the harvest, the multitude, the main harvest. That's what they're going to do, okay? And that ends around 2036, just as this thing shows us, or I'm sorry, 2029. And then there's going to be a period of time of rest, which prepares the other angels to open the trumpets, period. They can't happen at the same time because one opens the other. Last seal opens the trumpets, okay? So this perfectly aligns. We have the one world government already being set up through all of the things that we just saw here, with the one world currency, which is already in place, but it hasn't been taken place yet. But when we leave, I believe that all of this will kick off, okay, in one form or another, including war and whatever. And then on top of that, we also have the one world religion already in place, okay, and probably strengthening through this. Now, if you look at what happened with the sun, and what happened with the sun constantly over the United States right now, keep in mind the church is Israel, the 10 tribes. The church is the 10 tribes of Israel. They play their part perfectly. That's why they're going to remain behind, and 70% of them took something that they should not have done to create an abomination in the temple of God, okay, and made their robes dirty and have to now make them clean. That's why there's different colored robes for each of the Gospels. If you haven't figured that out, go and look at my number 8 video, which talks about the color of the robe when Jesus was put on the tree, or before he was put on the tree. Okay? Very interesting video. Nobody's been able to answer the question. Okay? So this is a perfect play out right now. We're watching it happen before our eyes. And it's there for all to see, but nobody sees it because they're asleep. They've been told that no man knows the day or the hour. Nobody will know the time of his coming. And yet Jesus tells us throughout Scripture, God tells us in Scripture, that we will know. We're supposed to know the time of his coming. We are supposed to know the time of his coming. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 tells us so. Revelation 3:3 tells us so. If you read anything where it talks about the thief in the night, it's telling us that those who are not knowing the time of his coming are going to remain behind, because only those who he couldn't thieve, that knew of his coming, he couldn't thieve from, they got taken. They got taken. Okay? Because they knew. They were watching. So we have all three of the things that we were searching for. And it's right there in front of our eyes, starting in 2016, leading to 7 easy years. Some people wouldn't call them easy, but they were. Those were the easy years. So look at seals and see what's coming to a theater near you in whatever part of the world you live in. Okay? 7 years to 2023. 2024 starts the next 7 years, I believe, at the end. And you get a perspective from the differences between the Moses calendar and the Noah calendar, which I also did in a previous video. Recent, very recent. All right. And that leads us to 2030, which opens the trumpets. And from 3031 to 3037, again, the trumpet period, with 2036 being the last of the tribulations. And then the 7th trumpet, something happens, and then we see a rest period, the covenant, etc. happening. Okay? And each of these groups, I believe, will leave at a different feast during the year. Okay? All right. Folks, it's time to awaken. It truly, truly is time to awaken. We are getting so incredibly close. Share with others. If you find this interesting, please share with others. At the beginning of my video, take a screenshot and just pass that along to someone. Okay? So more people will see this. More people will understand how this is playing out for truth. Okay? We aren't meant to keep this quiet. If you haven't watched my video about the watchman, okay, in Ezekiel, you should go watch that. Because if you keep it quiet, bad things can happen. Not only for you, but for them. We are not to keep this quiet. We are to reach out to people. It doesn't matter whether they believe or not. You still tell them, because as long as they hear it, at least they have a chance to understand it when it happens. It doesn't do any good, of course, unless they know Christ first, and that's number one. Okay? Knowing Jesus Christ and what he did, giving his blood as a sacrifice for our sins, that we may go to heaven. Right? Time is incredibly near, folks. There's not a lot of time left. Keep praying. Keep studying. And I say this constantly, don't put your souls in the hands of others. All right? Pastors, teachers, books, whatever. It doesn't matter. Don't put your soul in my hands. I can't save you. All right? Search out the truth for yourself. You can start with what I'm showing you partially here, but take that and then start digging. And if you find something, let me know, because I would be glad to see what it is that others find. Okay? All right. Again, time to awaken, folks. It is near. God bless you all.